Thank you. My name is Clint Hodges. I'm an alcoholic. If you're new or kind of new here, that it might seem odd to have that little comment about identifying ourselves from the at the public level. We don't give our last name, press, TV, film. And the press is always asked at these conferences to observe that and to not repeat our names in any articles that they may write. I was talking to the crew from the Wall Street Journal out here this afternoon, and it's kind of carried on without any real, but it's a good reminder to me that we have some observations that we make that are made for the purpose of protecting this program, which has become so precious to so many, and protecting what we believe in here and what has come to be what has saved our lives. And I think that anything that first of all, I think that this is a God-given program. I think that book was inspired in some amazing way. The book that is, I think Bill Wilson wrote it, but I think really in a sense he just held the pen. I don't have any doubt that Wilson took these steps. I have no doubt about that at all. He doesn't report his own personal experience of taking the steps. But in the book, he describes the results of taking the steps in a way that he could not possibly have known had he not taken these steps. And I'm, as we just heard a minute ago, Larry saying, I've had the wonderful opportunity after some time in sobriety to go back through that book. Out of total failure, out of a time in my life when I was absolutely done, after years of being here with you, somehow by some odd fluke I was given another chance to to live an abundant life. And I'll get into that to some extent here, but I am reminded to say that I have, as far as the steps and the book is concerned, made absolutely no modification to that, and would not. I went through that and currently just make some assumptions when I'm in that book, and that is that every word in it is true, every word in it applies to me, and there's a gold mine in every sentence, and that it is something to be observed with a certain amount of reverence going through there. Now, I don't worship the book, nor do I think we should. I don't worship the program. I have a relationship with God, and it has not always been that way in my life, and I cherish it. I grew up in my church experience as a kid was very strict and very stern. And so I am so glad to be free of that. I'm so glad to be here this weekend. I am so glad that all of the people that worked on the committee have come together to create a wonderful conference. And this is just the third Rose City Roundup here. And I like your theme, for lack of a better word. Dream the impossible dream. Why not? Why not? If you're new or relatively new around here and you begin to envision a life that is more than you ever could have expected, I can just suggest one thing. Don't be reasonable. Don't be reasonable. If we reach for reasonable things, we miss a lot of it. There's an oak tree outside my den, and somebody was over at the house some time ago now, and he loved that oak tree. It's huge. It's like 9 or 10 feet across, And I said, it started out as a little acorn. And he said, isn't it great that acorn didn't want to be the best acorn it could be? I'll arrange for the sound effects from this end if you don't. That acorn didn't want to be the best acorn it could be. It had no choice but to become what it was supposed to be, a huge and stately and beautiful oak tree. And I think that's our calling, to be open enough that whatever it is, we say yes. And so I'm very glad to be here. I'm glad that the committee pulled all this together, included me on the list. I'm glad that Jackie came down and picked me up at the airport. That's always a colorful experience. A total stranger. She had a band and a brass band. A huge sign that said Clint alcoholic. No, as we always do, we hook up, and I always know that we're going to hook up, and it's a little different one time I went back to Cincinnati, and it was kind of strange. A few weeks before, I called my office one day, and the receptionist said, "Well, you sure lead an interesting life." And I said, "Well, I do. What are you referring to?" She said, "Well, I understand you're going to be in Cincinnati this weekend." I said, "Yeah, I am. How do you know?" And she said, "There's a message here. The guy that's going to pick you up at the airport in Cincinnati has a wooden leg, and he's going to be carrying a big book." And and sure enough, he had a wooden leg and a big book under his arm. He was a Hell's Angel and had lost that leg in a motorcycle mess. Nice guy. I liked him a lot. And I must say I was relieved to notice that Jackie had all her arms and legs. This guy also had an earring. And I kidded him a little bit about it. I told other people in his presence that wasn't really an earring, that the Ohio State Wildlife Commission had caught him sleeping in the park and tagged his ear and sent his ass to Alcoholics Anonymous. We had a great time. He took me to the airport on Sunday, and he had a gift for me. He had in a brown paper sack a gift for me. And he said, "This is for you. I want you to have this gift." And we're people that ordinarily wouldn't mix, and this guy and I had just really gotten tight that weekend. I really loved him. And he had a gift for me. And I opened up this sack, and in it was, it was his first wooden foot, is what it was. A lot of things go through your mind when somebody has just... And this was long before they did all the security in the airports, but still, you don't really want to... I said, "You know what, Bill, you really need to keep this. This is such a great memento, and it'll be good for sponsoring other people. You got a foot you can move them along with." And so I lead an interesting life, a life beyond my wildest dreams. Just because I'm curious, if you're, say, in your first 60 days of sobriety, would you raise your hand? I'm not going to do anything else with it, but I'd like to know who you are. Welcome. Nice to have you here. We welcome you here. I'm going to tell you, I flew up here yesterday. I have been here enjoying the company and reconnecting with friends. I was so delighted to see Celine here today, and other speakers that I know and other people that I know from this community. This is kind of a return to the scene of the crime for me. I did a lot of stuff here in this area. But what's amazing to me is I woke up in my own bed yesterday morning and recognized that woman that was in there with me. I just knew her name. We've been married a while now, and I just, what a joy to wake up in great spirits with a woman that I love. It's just amazing to me because it wasn't always that way in sobriety and after I got here. Go ahead. My grandma used to that show. So I was in the Church of the Air in Billings, Montana as a kid growing up. And we were talking about it at dinner. Carl and I were going on about it, about all of those hellfire and brimstone things, about all of that getting called to the front of the church, about that whole business of you had to believe certain things. And if you couldn't believe those things, then you were a bad person and you were going to go to hell. And they had a description of hell for you. They described hell more precisely than heaven. Have you ever known? So we had a lot of detail about hell, about burning forever, all that. And I knew I was never going to go for it because I could not believe the things that they believed or said they believed, and I didn't believe that they believed them, really. And I know that was a source of strength, wonderful strength, to a lot of people. But to me, it didn't seem to ring true. To me, it was just something to be gotten through. And yet I'm a seeker. I'm a seeker. I have always looked. Somebody in a poem said, my life with all its ruined hours has been a search for him. And that's that's true for me. I never did want to go alone. But I was going alone in those days. And I went alone, and when I found alcohol, it didn't feel like I was going alone. It felt like this is what I was looking for. And when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous as such a failure, I gradually began to see that I had been in some part looking for what I was feeling in those rooms. And that feeling has consistently developed in me, such that my last drink was on August 14th, 1966, so I've been here 37 years, and I will tell you, and that's God's grace is all that is, but I just want you to know that I know that the last 13 years of that time has been the very sweetest of all. It's been the sweetest, because it was then and in that time that I found a place inside me where I can go where God is. And I found it out of this book that seemed such a clumsy read to me when I first read it. I found it there with the help of a loving human being that was taking me through. Last fall, I flew back to Washington, D.C. Last fall, I had to give a talk back there, a speech to a group, not an AA thing. And I happened to sit I was traveling coach, and there were two guys sitting next to me in 3 seats that were adjacent. It turned out they were both ministers. And they were sweet guys. I liked them. I liked them at once. And I found out they were ministers, and I liked them, and I found out that they had a little church in North Carolina. And I could tell by the way they described it that it was the church I grew up in. Baptisms and hellfire and brimstone and all of that, but done with love, done with caring, done with a sense of purpose, done with communication. And these guys described their life, and they loved their life. This one guy had been married, and he and his wife had 8 kids, all under the age of 12. Yeah, I know. And they were homeschooling these kids. Yeah. I wanted to ask him if his wife worked. I just wanted to do that. But I was afraid he'd say no, she stays home. I love these guys. And I told them about you and about the miracle of sobriety, the quiet miracle of a sober life that I found here with you. And about the fun we have. And about how we all laugh together and cry together. And they told me about their church and their ministry. But they're Protestant ministers. And so it was not going to be a casual conversation for long. They've got a few questions to ask. And they're very casual about it. So, where do you go to church? Well, I really don't go to church. I go to AA meetings, and they get a little... Even at 35,000 feet, they can go. Well, do you read the Bible? Not much. I read a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. And finally, we talk about something, and then after, I just want to ask you, how do you know how to act if you don't go to church and you don't read the Bible? And I said, you have no idea how many people there are in my life that will tell me exactly how to act. And have since the beginning. And then now they're a little annoyed because I don't seem to... And I'm okay with it, but I knew that the heavy artillery was coming up, and it did. And the guy seated next to me said, one of these days, you're going to be standing at heaven's gate. And God is going to want to know why He should let you into His heaven. And you don't go to church and you don't read the Bible. What are you going to say to Him? Well, I figured I might as well tell Him, huh? And I told him. And what I told him was this. I said, well, first of all, my God would not ask that question. Secondly, it would be way too late. And because 36 years ago then He invited me into His heaven, and I've been there ever since. And I can't imagine anything sweeter. Well, I didn't hear anything for about 30 minutes from these guys. They're digesting that information. And as I say, I greatly admired them. And I know they have a very, very useful purpose on this earth. But we do too. And the difference, I think, the difference is they have their beliefs. And we have our experience. And we needed the experience, and still need the experience. We need to feel the power of God's grace in our lives. And we need to recognize it. And we need to be tuned into that. And I have had that experience here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got here because a bail bondsman brought me to AA. He and I had been doing some business together, and I was living in Glendale, California at the time, a little suburb of LA, and I was living in what I called a double garage that had been cut up into several rooms. 4 of us lived there. And there was a shower out someplace. I didn't visit it personally, but I heard it. I had a stinky little room, bad room, that awful room. Just a sticky linoleum floors and a wet mattress, and it stunk all the time. And there was a sense of terror in that room that just made you nuts. I had a radio that wouldn't turn off. You start to play, just kind of start to play. And you try to get it, and it continue to play. You pull a plug out of the wall, the radio plays, it plays. You take it out and put it in the dirt by the door, the radio plays. And I had a old copy of Playboy magazine that I had invested in a fit of enthusiasm one day. It had become my social life. Like Honey, I'm Home. It was one of the... And that was it. That's all that was in the room. And nothing on the wall, nothing decorative in there, just futility and terror. Sometimes I get back to the room, sometimes I get as far as the park, and sometimes I go to jail. And I was living a life that I never dreamed that I would live, and it wasn't really living, and it wasn't really a life. It was just a strange little existence. But there was terror in it. I woke up one morning. I looked over by the door. I'm under the bed on the sticky linoleum floor. And I'm thinking I should get up on the bed because there was a rat over by the door, and it looked to me like he was going to be fiercer than I would be capable of. And I knew he was going to charge me. I don't know why I knew that. And that I should get up on the bed, but I would kind of watch that thing, and then I'd lose awareness of it, and then I'd come back around, and I'd watch that, and that rat just stared at me. And first light, a little more light in the room. And this rat that had so terrified me, when I looked over there again in the corner, had turned into a pair of socks laying over there. And so, if you're new and you've been held hostage by a pair of socks all night, I'm your guy. If you've had one of those radios, I get that. And that's the shape I was in. I had had promise and opportunity before that, and it was all gone. It was squandered. And I'm walking along the sidewalk, and this car drove up, and my bail bondsman was in it, and he said, "I'm going to take you someplace today." And I suppose as significant as anything is what didn't happen. I didn't ask him, "Where are we going?" It didn't matter. Could not matter. Jail, fine. County hospital, okay. Camarillo, which was the nut house, that's all right. There was a place out in the valley called, run by a guy named Ron Shire, a little drying out place, a little 3-day spin dry operation. We called it Shire's Dryer. I thought maybe he was going to take me out to Shire's Dryer. And he brought me to you. And I was around AA and in the meetings and in the comfort of the Alano Club of Glendale for 3 weeks, and then I ran across a stash of amphetamines and cash on the same day, and that requires a drink, and I was on a running drunk. Oklahoma. I went through Oklahoma. Lawton, Oklahoma. And finally got back to LA. A couple more weeks had gone by, and I woke up in that little nasty room that morning. Something else had been added. A jumping off point was now part of it. I could neither live with alcohol or without it, and I knew that. I had no idea there was an answer. I had already decided that there was not one for me. But I had no place else to go, and I was full of terror that morning, and I went to the only place that I would ever feel safe that day, and that was to you. I walked over to the club that morning, somebody was at mid-morning, maybe 10 or whenever, and the door was open and the coffee was made. Somebody was doing his job in AA. As I have seen here all weekend, people doing whatever job they have accepted for themselves, have agreed to take, doing their job in AA, gaining the comfort and sense of belonging from doing their job, providing the service to help somebody else without thought of return by doing their job. And this guy was doing his job. Bill was glad to see me. He died a month ago, Bill, sober all these years. He was glad to see me, and he had a gorgeous smile. And he said, "How you doing?" I said, "No good." "Come on in." "What's going on with you?" I said, "Well, I got drunk and let everybody down. Like AA in Glendale's going to collapse, you know." That did not faze him. He said, "Oh, are you alcoholic?" I don't know. I didn't say that because I know the right answer. But I didn't really know. And maybe I'm too young, or maybe it's just been, but I finally said to Bill, I said, "Yeah, I've been an alcoholic about a month now." Like a mild case, you know. Just caught it. I don't know how the hell it happened. Toilet seat, something, I don't know. And his smile broadened. He said, "So, you're an alcoholic and you got drunk?" And he's all teeth. And I said, "Yeah." He said, "We do that. That's the deal. Alcoholics get drunk." And he said something else to me and emphasized it. He said, "If you're an alcoholic of my type, you will drink no matter what. You're going to drink no matter what. Some people in AA might tell you don't drink no matter what. You will drink no matter what. If you're an alcoholic of my type." And there was something about that, and he never stopped smiling. There wasn't a trace of judgment in it. He's given me the simple dignity of the fact of the matter, and it's like, here we are. Here we are. And the guy's loving me. And he said, "You're going to drink no matter what." He didn't say, "You should get some food." He didn't say, "You should try to taper off." He didn't mention vitamins or treatment centers. He just said, "You're going to drink no matter what." And in that moment, the secret is out. The cat's out of the bag. The secret I never told anybody is being discussed as a straightforward matter of fact by a relative stranger. I drink no matter what. I will tell you I will be home right after work. I don't go home. I have to drink, just one. And then it's all over. I will tell you I will pick up the kids. My kids don't get picked up by me, not by me. Someone else has to pick up my kids. I will tell you I'm going to bring the check home. The check does not arrive. I must stop and cash the check. And I don't know if you're like me, but I would put the money in my pocket, except for $20 that I was going to drink on. And then I would stop for a drink, and I would order a drink, and I would pay for the drink, but I would pay for it out of family money. Because I'm not really drinking, so why get into my 20? And I'm on my way home. And you look around after a while later that evening after the fight in the pool cues, and the money is gone except the 20. And now I'm mad because why should I drink on the drinking money? And pretty soon that's gone. I drink no matter what. the strange economy, the strange reality, the strange idea that I'm not really drinking, that it'll be okay this time because I'll remember to eat. All of that is just, I accept it because I drink no matter what, whatever kind of strange insanity it requires for me to get to that state and justify it, I do that. And I do it automatically, and I do it without having any sense of how insane it is. And now the cat is out of the bag. Me and Bill know I drink no matter what. He's smiling, I'm not smiling. But I surrendered that day. I surrendered not to God, not to AA. I surrendered to the idea that I will drink no matter what. That Skid Row is 3 weeks away. That little smelly, awful, nasty room won't be mine very much longer. I was selling encyclopedias door to door. I won't be doing that much longer. I didn't want my kids to see me. I'd been married twice by this time and had 3 sons. I didn't want to be seen by any of those people. And shortly they wouldn't be seeing me. It was over. And I'm going to drink myself to death. And Bill's okay with it, and I'm okay with it, and the cat's out of the bag, and I felt better. Because that silly duplicity and that funny divided spirit of I've got to drink and I've got to quit was collapsed into one simple idea. I will drink no matter what. That surrender was very important. I mean, I didn't know I was surrendering at the time. Of course, we never do. I didn't know for years that there was a way to intellectually absorb that day. People that have surrendered take very specific actions. You've seen it. I've seen it. On TV, they throw their rifles down and they go sit at the side of the road and they wait for somebody to come along and tell them what to do. And my defenses were gone. And I went and took a seat in the Alano Club of Glendale, whatever that may mean, and waited for you to come along. I didn't wait that you would tell me what to do. I just remembered you had been kind to me. And without my knowledge, that began a journey. Without my consent, this higher power you talk about removed the obsession to drink. Isn't that something? The quiet miracle of a sober life begins in an instant, a blink of an eye. In the book it says things that are irritating, frankly. Like the goose hung high. Come on, Wilson, what is that? What are you what? Or this. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. How nice for you, Bill. Oh, we're all so happy. And then you go back and read it again, and one day you say, wow, God's impact on me was sudden. That is sudden. Like on the 14th of August, I'm a drunk. And on the 15th of August, I'm not a drunk. Haven't been one since. Isn't that moving right along? Isn't that like kind of, Jesus, you'd think that'd take years to cover that kind of ground. And he did it without my consent. I wouldn't have asked for that. I wouldn't have asked. I didn't know I was under an obsession. I didn't know there was anything like this terrible craving that comes on me when I've had one drink. I didn't know about all the insanity in between. I love that, and it's been discussed before, that story in the book about Jim. Isn't he a beauty? What happened this time, Jim? Well, he was a car salesman, and he was working for a dealer that had purchased the business from him. He's working for a business he had to sell. He said, I showed up at work on a Tuesday morning, and it doesn't say anything about it in the book, but as Joe and Charlie tell us, it's, what happened to Monday, Jim? Well, we know what happened to Monday. Monday, he's hanging on. I showed up at work on a Tuesday morning, a little irritated that I had to work for a company I used to own. A little irritated, I'll bet. It's all this understatement for us, isn't it? Guy sat in front of Silkworth's desk. How you doing? Oh, I'm a little restless. He just decided that morning to go to Australia. I'm a little restless. Irritable. Just decided to kill his wife that morning. I'm a little irritable today. And so Jim was having a little trouble at work. Had a few words with my boss, but nothing serious. Jim, words with the boss are always serious. There's just no way they're not serious. Decided to take a drive out in the country where I might find a prospect for a new car. That's where they are, Jim, lining those country roads, waiting for you. Oh, I decided to stop for a sandwich. This guy has spent 4 days now either in a drunk or getting over a drunk, and he wants a sandwich. Now we find out there's a bar in this place, but he wasn't thinking of drinking. In fact, when he got in, he orders a sandwich and some milk. Now we know why. Jim's got to go home that night, and he's got a few things to clean up, and he would love to get back in the big bed. And he kind of feels like if he could go home, he knows he's going to get some questions about the day. Did you sell anything? No. Did you have anything to eat? Yeah. I had a sandwich and a glass of milk. God, that should move you miles, shouldn't it? I mean, sounds so healthy, for Christ's sake. In fact, I had 3 glasses of milk. So he orders a sandwich and a glass of milk, decides he'll have enough. And then the idea that I thought was insane comes up. Put a little whiskey in that milk. Now that's clearly an insane idea. But the whole thing is insane, and I didn't notice it for a long time. It's all insane. And it's all thinking without the addition of alcohol. The whole morning, went to work for a company I used to own. Jim, stop it. Jesus. So we're just goofy, and I was goofy. Awful goofy, and I didn't know it. I mean, the only way I have to measure how my mind is working is by checking in with my mind. And kind of have the hound dogs watching the steaks, you know. That's. I have a friend in Norwalk. I love this guy. I love him like a rainbow. He's in his kitchen looking out in his backyard, and he sees his dog out there with the neighbor's rabbit in his mouth. And he doesn't want any trouble with the neighbor, so he runs out there. The rabbit's all bloody. He grabs it. The rabbit's dead, but he brings it inside, washes it off, blow dries the rabbit. Yeah. And waits till dark and sneaks it in that cage next door. And 2 weeks go by, or a month, and he sees the neighbor out in front. He said, "How you doing?" Guy said, "I'm doing good." Couldn't leave it alone. He said, "How's your rabbit?" The guy said, "It's funny about that rabbit. It died a month ago, and I buried it, but now I see it's back in that cage back there." This thought. That's why we can't let that SUV into our lane on the freeway. Because if they get into Los Angeles 30 seconds before I do, they've won and I'm lost. And it is my lane, we know that. Well, those early days in Alcoholics Anonymous were wonderful. I loved them. I loved the relief of it. I didn't know I was sober. I didn't know what, but I'm 9 months sober. I'm on the beach with my son, just the two of us. I was allowed for the first time to see my youngest son. His mother knew something had happened to me. I didn't know. He said, my boy, as we stood there, "Why are you crying, Daddy?" I didn't know I was, but I remember what I was thinking. I was thinking, my God, I'm with my boy and I haven't had a drink in 9 months. I had to count back. It was the spring of '67. 9 months. I had my driver's license back. There was a place I could go. I didn't live in the shed anymore. I had a little efficiency thing. I'd been invited to one of your homes for a birthday party. In your home. And that seemed so wonderful to me. I had a lot to celebrate. It was about that time that the guys let me come with them on an institutional panel. Men and women that went to meetings and did prisons and mental hospitals. They said, "Clint, you can come with us if you want." Oh, yeah, I want to. Because they loved each other so much. Because they were constantly singing their song of respect and love to one another. You could see it and you could feel it. Because their look in their face was the look of people that consistently are willing to give more than they get out of life. Oh, these people were so beautiful to me. You were. When we go down the stairs and jump into Bill Christian's old Chrysler, I sat in the middle in the back seat on the hump. 5 others, and they never stopped loving each other. Down the freeway, we get off the freeway, they said, "We're going to put on a meeting in that hospital there, Metropolitan State Hospital, and we're going to put on a meeting in the nut part of it." I said, "Oh, where is that?" They said, "It's that cinder block building out in the middle." And we pulled up over there, and we all got out. And I suddenly got it, why they had included me. 6 of us were going in that nut house. 5 of them were coming back out. And my thought was, God, I can outrun every one of these old fools. I can be over a cyclone fence. And then a strange thought, if they think I need to be in the nut house, maybe I do. And I just kept walking. We went in, we stayed an hour. They brought the patients in. We were with the patients. They put on a meeting. I said nothing. After an hour, we all 6 of us walked out into that warm California evening, an evening like tonight, and got back on the freeway, and I slept in my own bed that night. And I'd learned from you a very interesting thing. If you're new and you're having trouble sleeping, if you're new and you wake up too often at 2 a.m. knowing 2 things. 1, you haven't had enough sleep, and number 2, you've had all you're going to get. I brought that terrible problem up. It's an awful problem because you're so vulnerable to the idea of going out and getting, if you're midnight, I better go get something to drink. I asked a man, "How do you get to sleep at night if you don't drink?" He said, "Do you really want to get to sleep?" And I said, "Yes." Now, I know it's going to be a big deal here because of the way he asked me. "You really want to get to sleep? Well, step into this room over here with me." He said, "I'll tell you what, make your bed." "What?" "Yeah, put clean sheets on your bed." How the hell did he know about those sheets? And then he said, "Say a prayer." And he gave me a prayer to say. I knew it wouldn't work. I thought it was nonsense. And I went back to my little room that night. This is early on. And I would have dismissed the whole thing, but you knew about the sheets. Oh, God. Nobody knew. The psychiatrist didn't know about the sheets. Oh, he probably knew we didn't discuss it. I can tell you that. I made the bed. I said that stupid prayer. A prayer from my childhood. And I don't say prayers. They don't work. You know, you say that, remember that one, if I should die before I wake? That'll keep you awake a while, won't it? It's just... What? I don't do it. I said the prayer and I closed my eyes knowing it wouldn't work, and the next thing I knew it was 7 o'clock the next morning and I had slept all night, and I never have forgotten awakening at 7, rested that day. I've heard so many strange things from you. I heard a woman one night say that her sponsor told her, if it's going to be funny someday, it's probably funny today. Yeah. I heard a woman say, our problems die of neglect here. And you've done it and I've done it, driving down the freeway with a problem that is so awful, so incapable of solution. We see no way out of it. And then traffic snarls up and we have to begin to drive and pay attention. And then we resume freeway speeds again and we try to get back to our problem. And it's not there. I can't find it. We scramble and think and oh, there it is. Oh, thank God. I almost, it almost got away from me. But they will die of neglect. I went to a guy that was my sponsor. Now, if you're new, they'll tell you to get a sponsor. I just want to, let's just talk. The reason you're not getting a sponsor or not confiding in the one you call a sponsor is because you know that they're going to get right in the middle of your personal life. That's what they do. And we don't want anybody in the middle of our personal life. So here's what you do. You get a sponsor, you call them a sponsor, and every once in a while, you throw them a bone. Just give them a question. You don't care how it comes out. Either way is fine. Should I wear the green socks or the red socks? Oh, thanks. That's so helpful. I appreciate it. I go to this guy. I said, because I knew it was time to keep him at bay by giving him I said, I got a problem. He said, what is it? I said, well, frankly, I hate my ex-wife. He said, he immediately got rude with me. He said, do you want to do something about that? Is that rude or what? But you say, yes, I do. I didn't want to do anything. I enjoyed hating her. Something to do on the freeway, you know. Do you want to do something about that? Yes. Wouldn't have bothered you otherwise. He said, well, I'll tell you, did you know that if you want to change how you feel about somebody, you change how you treat them? Okay, thanks. He said, come here. How's that child support coming? I mean, they get you when you're not looking. By the time that conversation was over with, I had been told exactly how to pay child support. I didn't have a checking account for 5 years, but he said, you get money orders? Yeah. You got a job? Yeah. There's a court order that you pay? Yeah. Pay. I don't want to hear you can't afford it. Pay. Pay. On payday, take an envelope with her name and address and a stamp, and when you buy a money order for the child support, and by the way, get caught up, stick that envelope with the money order in it in the mail slot before you leave the bank. Do not, and this is how I knew. He said, do not take the envelope home and put it on the dresser and think about it. Are you like me? You kind of feel like if you pay it on time, she's won and you've lost. Isn't that weird? And I began to do that. And she became a better mother almost at once. She was really a bad mother until I started paying child support. And quickly I had the weirdest thought one day. You know, she's really a pretty good mother. She's done a good job with that boy. Strange thought. And I've never changed my mind about that. But I paid child support. And I don't have enough money to pay child support. Except that when I pay child support, my money is not a problem. I mean, the universe kind of salutes that. Oh, you say you don't have enough money to... Okay, we get that. We'll make sure you don't have enough money. Oh, you have enough money to pay child support and you're paying it. Oh, okay, so you're willing to have some abundance in your life. The universe salutes that. The amends thing is critically important. They told me if you're going to make financial amends, take money. Oh, well. I'm 5 years sober. A guy tells me I got to get to... he said, you got to go to law school. Farthest thing from my mind. For me. Now, I had watched Carl go through. And what a superb student. And a superb lawyer. And how proud I was of him. That he had done that. But I couldn't do that. Not me. I could not do what my identical twin brother had done. Because he's a good person. He deserves that. He's smart. I can't do that. And this guy insisted that I look into it. And of course I did. I got to work, and I was working, and I got to go to meetings. There's a way to do it at night. It's not the most elegant way to do it, but it takes 4 years. I went back to him. I said, do you know how? Yes, I looked into it, and it takes 4 years. And do you know how old I'll be in 4 years if I go to law school? And how old will you be in 4 years if you don't go to law school? So I went. I was 5 years sober. When I was 9 years sober, the state of California gave me a license to practice law. They wouldn't give me a license to drive when I got here, so, we're moving along. And I'm glad I did that. I am glad I wasn't reasonable about it. I'm glad that, in a sense, it was an impossible dream. And I had to develop a vision of being in court during law school just to get the day going. And I did that. And I did what's required. And I filled out that awful application to take the state bar, where they ask these terrible questions like, have you ever been arrested for anything other than a minor traffic violation? And they leave 3 little lines on them. And I'm at C attached page, and they let me take it. And I passed. And I had, by then, 9 years, and over the next few years, my dependence on God began to shift to something that I was creating. And I didn't know it, but I knew my life was getting scrambled, and I knew that the joy of Alcoholics Anonymous was diminishing for me. And I knew that while I was right here in your midst and going to meetings and doing what you told me to do and sponsoring people, that I wasn't I had no passion about it. And the legal thing was okay, I liked it, but it had too degenerated into exercise your character defects, call it advocacy, and send out a bill. It's kind of, and there's no elegance and no honor in that. It's just, I'm running. And I had another woman in my life. I had never had a relationship. When I'm 14, Carl and I are standing at that grave in the low rent part of Billings, Montana, and they're throwing those clods of dirt on my mother's grave. I don't love you. You don't love me? I don't love you. I'm furious with her. I was so disappointed, so betrayed. I thought she loved me. And when I'm about 5, I got the irrefutable evidence that I need to tell me she doesn't love me. Because she brought a little baby girl into the house. Seemed to love that. Those moments when she and I would she would tuck me in and we'd whisper our secrets and we'd say a goofy little prayer. And I could make her laugh. Those were all gone now. She doesn't love me. And she died a tough one. She died of cancer. And the treatment was just brutal. And she suffered. And I'm at the graveside with, you don't love me, I don't love you, I don't love you. And so I couldn't have relationships with women. Because you can't trust them. Now that's an old idea. But when it's my old idea, it doesn't seem like an old idea. It just seems like that's the way that it is. I had something other than relationships. I had arrangements. There's a difference. There is a difference. A relationship is a covenant. There's a sacred piece to it. It's we're in it together. I'm not here for security. I'm not even here for happiness. I'm here for growth and to support your growth. I'm here because I'm called to do this job. I'm here because I want to be here, and I'm not going anyplace else. But an arrangement is a whole different thing. It can be temporary. It can be contractual. It's like, you do this and I'll do that. And there's a penalty clause in it, of course. For when you don't do this, then I don't have to do that. And it's for security. And it's for, I want to be happy. And I think maybe you'll make me happy. And so, and God, you can't have an arrangement with God, just so you know. Relationship, yes, but not this other. We can't send him a list. Well, so I'm going through a tough patch in my sobriety, and it's falling apart. When I was 23 years sober, I'm still scrambling and working hard and getting all this done, and I'm trying big lawsuits downtown L.A., and some of it was even name in the paper stuff. And I'm having, in one sense, a life that I never dreamed I would have, because there was a great house and the right car and the income stream, and the burn rate was exactly the same as the income stream, so I never had anything left over. And I had a lady on my arm. And another one, and one day it was all over. My partner came to me and said, I don't want to play with you anymore. I had become too angry. The lady came and said, I'm done, I'm out. The house went on the market. The income stream stopped because my partner was brought in the business, and I'm the trial guy. And I was more frightened than I had ever been in my life. I don't remember being that scared. I knew there are 4 kids in our family. Carl and I are the eldest, and we have a little sister in Denver, and we had a little brother who was in Atlanta, Georgia. Not an alcoholic, but pushing a grocery cart around the streets of Atlanta. And he wasn't coming out of there. And the whole thing was he was angry at the way we had been raised, the way he had been raised. And he was given a tough deal. And Carl and I got away, and they're still stuck. And his thing seemed to be, as many of us are, they really did a bad job. And it's my duty to tell the rest of the world how bad a job my folks did. And so I'm going to push a cart on Skid Row. Do you see, if my folks had done it right, I wouldn't have to live in this little shed. Isn't that enough evidence so the world gets that my folks did it wrong? My brother wouldn't have to push that cart. So the people, at least in Atlanta, would know. And of course they don't know. They don't care. They're not looking. But he had a point to prove, and he died proving it. And I was so terrified. I didn't think I'd drink. But none of what I had become so dependent on was there for me. And I knew I would be in Atlanta, pushing a cart. And because I used to think God was mad, angry. That's not it. We wouldn't be sitting here if God were angry. No, He loves us. And He loved me then. And a guy came out of the woodwork. And we started going through the steps. An interesting thing happened. I got a piece of information about how powerful this is. I called Don Pritz over in Aurora, Colorado, because I couldn't figure out why in 100 days all of that stuff had gone out of my life. He said, "What were you doing just before that happened?" I said, "Well, I was getting a little unconnected to AA. It felt like I was not a good member of AA, and the joy was gone, and I didn't know how to get back, and I had no idea that I had shifted my dependence away from God and onto this thing I had created." And he said, "Well, what did you do?" I said, "Well, I decided I ought to get back in the steps, and so I said the 3rd step prayer." He said, "You did?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Did you notice that right underneath that prayer it says we thought well before taking this position, making sure that we could abandon ourselves utterly to Him?" I said, I didn't notice that. He said, "Well, did you at least notice that in the prayer it says, 'Relieve me of the bondage of self'?" I said, "Yes." He said, "What were you bonded to?" "Well, the house, the income stream, the car, the pretty lady, the arrangement, the image." I had an image that I was very bonded to, in AA and out of AA. And an image is just like really an interesting thing. It's like when I was in the Marine Corps, they taught us to camouflage trucks by putting branches on them. And my trucks always looked like trucks with branches on them. They're supposed to look like trees, you know. And that's how I look with an image. I look like a donkey trying to keep an image in place. You know? And he said, "So you asked to be relieved of the bondage of self, and you didn't really know what you were asking." But he heard that. He honors the slightest turn in His direction. And He gave you exactly what you asked for. He relieved you, and it only took Him 100 days. Isn't that good? He can move that thing. I'm going, oh man. And I'm not saying don't be saying that 3rd step prayer, but there's a sequence. And I hadn't really paid any attention to it. So I went back and started again, and now I had a glimpse of how much power there is in this thing. And how it's designed to give us, it says in the book, an entire psychic change. That means a new mind. A new mind. A new way of being in the world, a new way of being. And the discovery that I mentioned at the top of this thing, at the beginning, that there is a place inside of me where I can go where God is. The great reality is deep within, and the very, very magical piece of it is that He's not inside me like a pebble in a glass of water or a raisin in a bun. God's inside me like the ocean is in a wave. Like the ocean is in a wave. Sometimes I'm up there chattering around, sometimes I'm quiet. But we're inextricably linked. And I remember very clearly the day I found a place inside me where I can go. I haven't always had that feeling, but I've always had the knowledge. I had the experience, and it was not necessary to form any kind of a belief around it. It just became who I am. And so that's available here. I'm just a drunk. I'm hopeless. I cannot move from the floor to a bed. I can't do those things. And because of God's grace, not only was that obsession removed, but when I was finally ready, here, in your midst, to take my pack off and say, whatever, things began to happen. I had to take other people through, as I had been taken through. And for me it became a kind of a one-on-one thing. Carl does it with a group. Other people, John does it in whatever way he does. And there are people throughout the room that are doing this important stuff. And and we're called to it in a weird way. And my office on Saturday morning has 3 or 4 guys coming. Sunday the same. Do I go to church? Oh no. Do I worship? Oh yes. Yeah, I worship. I worship. I worship. And we finally get to step 9. And that takes a lot of horsepower. It takes the horsepower of the first 8 steps, plus the willingness that step 8 gives us. And we get on the road. Can I make amends by phone? No, we're talking direct amends here. Well, I just thought maybe I could make some of them by phone. Did you do the harm by phone? No, I showed up for that. Well, then get on the plane to Denver and be with your sister. Go to Portland and be with your brother. Go to Roanoke and kneel at that grave where your dad is. You got to forgive him, you know. That's all we have left. And it's the theme and the principle of step 8, forgiveness. To take another look, to rewrite our history, to see it in a completely different way. And the one that scared me, of course, was my mom. And 40 years after she died, I knelt at that grave, thinking that my grandma would come out of the Wicked Witch of the West, my mom and all that. I was there for 2 days, and I wept all my tears. And I saw that she always loved me, that I could always trust her. There never was a day that we didn't have 3 meals, a roof, clothing. And she made sure we did. Did she love me? I think that's right. And I discovered it that day. I discovered it kneeling at her grave in the low-rent part of the cemetery in Billings, Montana. While I hated her, I somehow or other had the odd capacity to bring women into my life that I thought were like her. I thought that's what I get. angry, dark, brooding women that don't want to be on this earth, on this journey. I just thought that. And I don't know how I attracted them into my life, but there they were. After that, I didn't have that idea anymore. And there are a couple of people in the room that have met my wife. God, what a joy she is. And we whisper our secrets and say prayers and tell each other funny things. And it's kind of like it was when I was a little kid, except it's sweeter. And I take these guys through and they make their amends. I'll tell you about Tom and then I'm going to sit down. Tom is he's 10 years sober now. And he'd struggled for 10 years to be here with us and couldn't get there. And he was a druggie and he was a drinker and he still has a bullet in his butt from some deal gone bad. I love Tom. Tom was a window washer and also a burglar. Isn't that a nice melding of careers? I just love it. He always knew where to go back at night. And he was married and he also had a bad memory because he could remember all 13 places in South Pasadena that he had burglarized. Homes. He said, I can't tell you how afraid I am. I am a felon. And I could go to jail in a heartbeat if they'd call a cop. I said, I know. I've looked for that line in the book too that gives you an out. Tom, I wish I could find it. But I wish more that you get free. And he went up, knocked on doors, said hi. Did you live here 5 years ago when your house was burglarized? Yeah. Well, I did that. And I came by to clean it up with you. And he got a variety of interesting responses at about that time. But he saw it through. He stayed with it. At the end, the question is so sweet, what can I do to set this right? And they'll tell you. And they told him. And he did it. Nobody called the cop. But there was one that he couldn't get to. He'd gone by once and he couldn't make himself get out of that pickup. He went by again and they weren't home. And then he finished all his amends, and it's possible to finish them. And there's a big difference between doing all of your amends and all but 10. That difference is huge. One morning, he called me one morning about 11 o'clock. He said, I got to go over there today. It's the last one. And I knew what he was talking about. We had discussed it several times. He went over there that day. I said, call me when you're done. And he called. The phone rang. Tom, I could hear the freedom in his voice. That's what we get from the steps. Freedom. Freedom. From service we get a connection. We get relief. But from the steps, freedom. I said, how did it go? He said it was an older couple. And they'd lived there quite a while, and they had been living there when I burglarized their home. They had a lot of questions for me. We stood on the porch, and then the husband came out, and he had questions. Why did you rip that mirror off the wall? Why did you pull the food out of it? And he remembered doing a lot of that, and he answered the questions the best that he could. And after a while, everybody calms down, and now they're in the house, and out come the cookies. And he has to ask, as we all must, what can I do to set that right? And they said, you don't need to do anything more. He said, that doesn't seem right to me. Well, they said the insurance took care of it, and it's been a while. But more than anything, until you came by here today, we had always thought that our son had done that. And we're glad to know he did not. And a family healed up, and Tom got free. And I saw a miracle, and I've come to expect them if we're doing this work. Lois Wilson was eulogized at her funeral, and somebody said that she was a person who only had 2 or 3 prayers. And we all have these 3 prayers. The first one is, help me. And we all know that prayer. And the second one, give me. Not a bad prayer. The serenity prayer is, give me, grant me the serenity. And when all of that is done, and we've said, help me, and said, give me, and those prayers will be answered, we must ask one more. Use me. And that's the one you've taught me to say. Thank you.